I think that awareness without action is toxic.
In a world where awareness rules, why are we still searching for the answers?
Clarity doesn't just come from sitting and thinking, right? It comes from trying things on.
Best-selling author and TedX speechwriter Ashley Stahl steps into the conversation.
It's hard to be who you are. It's painful to be who you are. It's not always easy.
And invites us to turn our awareness into authenticity.
Being who you are takes so much vulnerability. I know nobody wants to hear it, but it is simply the truth of the human experience.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. This is Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Hi, Ashley. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I am so honored and excited to get to talk to you today. You have such an interesting background, and you have pivoted your career in such a big way, and I really want to talk about that. But I really think we should start with what's going on in the Middle East right now, because I know you have a counterterrorism background, and I would love to get your opinion on what's going on in the conflict. It's so heartbreaking for us all to watch, and I'm not even going to pretend I'm an expert on it. I'm watching, from a distance, just like everyone else. And I would love to just see your thoughts on it before we jump into kind of what you've done in your life, pivoted from counterterrorism into career coaching. So let's start there where you once started, and then move on to kind of like finding your purpose. I know it's kind of a big shift, but I think you're used to that.
Yeah, totally. I'm always open to a big old shift. First of all, thanks for having me. And as far as what's going on right now in Israel and Gaza, it is heartbreaking. And even though I'm an expert, having worked in national security, I worked on Afghanistan and I studied Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb when I went to graduate school. And when I was at the Pentagon, I really deepened my understanding of the Afghan population. So my only skin in the game outside of, when it comes to what's happening in the Middle East right now is being a human and caring about human rights. So my heart is just broken that there's so many innocent people getting mired in the crossfire of war. And, and I feel like if there's anything I've learned from working in national security, it's the more that I learn, the less that I know. The more I would learn, even with presidential elections, I remember thinking when I worked in the Department of Defense, and I got my security clearance and I got all this top secret information. I just remember thinking, how does anybody run for office and make promises when they get a huge pile of paper that comes to them after they get sworn in with a lot of information that might change the way that they want to make promises or the way that they look at their situation? So as far as what's happening in Israel, my dad is Jewish. I live in America. I also was educated in France, and their education system tends to have a bias in the pro-Palestinian direction, and the American education system clearly has a bias for Israel. I've kept pretty neutral because I care about human rights and innocent lives. So I've been pretty devastated this week. I have friends of friends who are missing. It's just heartbreaking. We live in a world where there's anyone that would decapitate 40 babies. That's just unfathomable. And I'm aware from people that I know in Israel that the media is not showing how gory this actually is, which it's interesting because I worked in national security in my 20s, and now I'm in my late 30s, and I look back and think to myself, I'm way too sensitive for this career, and I didn't know myself when I chose that career. I knew that I wanted to be a protector and a helper, but I didn't know myself well enough to realize that that kind of a career would just break my heart. So my heart goes out to everyone who is in fear right now in the Middle East, who I can't sleep thinking about it, and anyone who's affected directly and indirectly, my heart goes out. We live in a world where it's really hard to even get our own shit together. And then when we walk around and we see homeless people, we see addicts that are on the street, schizophrenia, mental health, it's like I notice that people close their eyes to it, or they don't want to lock eyes with people because, number one, maybe they don't feel safe. They feel like the person's unpredictable. Maybe they're going to come attack them. But number two, it's hard to look at it. It's hard to look at people who are struggling when we work so hard on our own struggles. And one of those biggest struggles is like the spiritual sickness that comes with trying to figure out our purpose, trying to figure out what we want to do with our lives. And, if you think about life, it's like, it's really hard to exist on this planet. Like, we need to go to school. Some of us don't, which is fine. Then we need to put food on the table, and then we need to provide, whether we have dogs or kids or partners. We need to face hardship. Maybe it's challenges with our health, whatever it is. We face all these things, and then we get out into the world and we see other people suffering in their own way. So it makes sense to me that we close our eyes to it, even if it's maybe not the right thing, or it is. I leave it up to everybody listening to decide what's right for them. But I had a sister who was an addict, and she died from her addiction, and I supported her, helped her. Eventually she hit rock bottom and became homeless per her own decision. And that was what killed her. And, I have a soft spot for people who are homeless, and disadvantaged. So I look at them when I'm in the street. I try to give to them. I don't have a story that they're going to use my money on drugs. If they are, so be it. I still feel good giving them something. Because if your life is that hard that you're on the street asking for money, clearly things aren't going well. But I totally have empathy for people who are keeping their eyes closed. And I don't have judgment, because it is so hard to look at the world. And if we really look at the world, we don't just have what's going on in the Middle East. We have what's going on in Ukraine. We have what's going on with Taiwan being afraid that they're going to be gobbled up by China. And, it's like, everybody's got, and I'm a pretty neutral party as far as just watching all of this and trying to make my own sense of it.
So what can we do? I mean, yeah, closing our eyes might stop us from having to see it or absorb it. And I even like how you talked about it from the spiritual aspect of it, all this that's going on. I read actually something yesterday that was, from someone that is definitely into the spiritual world, saying that, we all sign these soul contracts and we all come down here and we're actually like choosing to be in some of these positions. And, I'm an intellectual person. I'm also a spiritual person. I'm bringing these ideas together, and in my mind, I cannot fathom why I would ever choose to come down and put myself in that situation where I am going to experience so much heartache and pain. And we all experience heartache and pain, like you said, in our own way, just getting through our day as normal as any which way. We all have our own issues, but like on that extreme level, like I have a hard time comprehending it. So like, how can we support others, and how do we deal with it, and how do we go through it? I mean, you've obviously experienced this on many different levels, personally and career-wise.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that for me as an entrepreneur, there have been two things. Number one is my own self-awareness. I think sometimes the self-development space can be a little self-involved. But it's also quite inspiring, right? The idea of all of us trying to be the best version of ourselves is really potent and useful. The idea of all of us going inwards and working to release our ego's hold on us so that we can be heart-centered and open and non-judgmental and receptive is really, really powerful. But it feels amiss for me to say that all I can do is go inwards and be the best person I can be to shine out on the world, because the truth is, there's a lot going on outside of me. So the second piece of the puzzle for me has been not only trying to remove judgment, be receptive, and hear both sides to a story and make a choice for myself, but B, to earn as much money as I can, not just to take care of myself and make an impact in the world through the services I'm offering. Like, in the past year, I wrote 40 TED Talks and booked 39 of those people on the TEDx stage. And it was a high-end offer, and there was a % of my income that went to causes that I really care about. Like, I really care about dog rescue. I really care about children's hospitals. So I think for all of us, what is really important is to ask yourself, how can you better the world in a way that resonates for you? And just because something is going on today and it's heartbreaking, you don't need to judge yourself if that's not the cause that you're feeling pulled to. You get to choose what you feel pulled to. We know that in human trafficking, there are more children and women being trafficked than the entire Black slave trade era combined. So there are people right now being sold into slavery at numbers that are significantly, they're shocking, people who have no say over their lives or their bodies. And so when we really tune into what is wrong with the world, I think there's plenty to go around of how we can help. And it's a really personal choice not to just go with what's present right now, which I absolutely care about, but also to go on an ongoing basis to what deeply resonates with my heart, and I give from that place of resonance and integrity.
I like that. I like that it's coming within, finding out what really resonates with you and sits with you and your spirit, but also coming from a place of service. And that is something that I've talked a lot about is that's how we find our purpose, is in service. And
right.
Whether that is making a bunch of money so that we can donate to a cause or just better your own life and your own family, that's it. As selfish as that may seem, it also isn't, and I feel like there's this like weird line you walk between, success in that aspect and serving others. And it's something I've definitely struggled with. The want to, achieve that financial success, but because a lot of my driving force is not my only driving force, but a lot of my driving force is that I do want to make an impact. And you do need to have money to make an impact a lot of the times. You don't have to, but it does make it easier, and you can impact in a big way. And I know that's kind of what you're doing with helping people find their purpose through their careers, because like you were in counterterrorism, you realized, this isn't really for me. I read how you said it was a big interest, but it wasn't a passion. So how do you help people find that passion so that we really can find our purpose and serve?
Right. I think that my core message is don't follow your passion. Don't do what you love, do what you are. So I think that according to research, we are most helpful when we're doing things we're good at, and chances are you're pretty good at being you. So I'm really interested in helping people discover what their zone of genius is from a skill set perspective, because you could be interested in fashion, but that has nothing to do with the tasks and skills that you are spending your day carrying out. And so the question then becomes, what are the tasks and skills that you have a natural ability to, with your mind, your body, your heart, to carry out? What is that core skill set that you can sharpen and harness that maybe is obvious for you, but really difficult for other people? Chances are what you're really good at is not something that other people are naturally talented at. And so I think it's really important to start to do an audit on yourself of, where do you actually feel like you're the most skilled and competent? Where do you actually feel like you add the most value? And that is, I think, an experiment. It doesn't really make sense to pop out of the school system at age 16, 18, whatever it is, go to college if you do, and then suddenly know what you want to do in the workforce. How do you know what you want to do in a place you've never been? And so I think that accepting that your career is truly an experiment and a process is one of the most fundamental things we need to do. And people don't want to pay the cost of admission for a fulfilling career. The cost of admission is experimentation. It's really taking a look at trying things on and getting engagement and getting clarity through that. Like, clarity doesn't just come from sitting and thinking, right? It comes from trying things on. And I think that people hold their career too heavily, and the real answer is to hold it more lightly, fail fast, try things on, throw them away, and realize that the thread of your past is something that you can carry into the story you tell about your future. So if you want to make a career pivot and you work in communications and you want to work in tech, take a look at where in your communications career have you used the tech that you want to be working in next. How can you communicate about that little piece, even if it's 5% of what you've done? So I think it's not just about our skill set, but about the story we tell about it and how we make sense of it for other people and how willing we are to be in experimentation.
I mean, that's a really interesting thought because I've actually had this conversation a lot with my husband. The whole concept of the school system and how it is set up to create workers and not help you follow your passion and follow your purpose and follow the things that you're good at. It like puts you in this little box. And I don't know what it is about the generations before us. Like, I think, you know, I'm a little bit older than you, but not much. We did everything we were supposed to do. You know, we're like, you go to school, you go to college, you get your job, you do this, you know, and then there's a lot of adults right now that are very unfulfilled in their life that, you know, we followed the rules. And I do agree. Now, I did go to college. I wanted to go to college. I got to the school I went to. I actually graduated early because I wanted to start working because I had a passion for what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to do and I knew my gifts. I knew what I was good at. And it served me extremely well until COVID hit, obviously. And then, you know, the world changed. Now I've started my own thing. It's all working its purpose out and it's all going the way it should. I strongly believe that. But I don't think everyone needs to follow that path. I don't think there's so much pressure. And I see it from friends of mine now that have kids that are getting a little bit older, how this constant push to go to this school so you could get into this college and you could do that. I don't actually think that's the answer. I don't think we have to push everyone through the system. I think there is something about that experimentation that you're talking about that serves different people in different ways.
Right. 100%. And I think that experimentation is for most people not really optional. And if you really want to figure out what you want to do, like talk to anyone who's succeeded and they've tend to share stories about their failures. And so we talk about experimentation like it's optional, like, well, I don't want to have to go do that thing to figure out the answer. But it's like, well, then how are you expecting to get the answer? You know? And so that is something that I think it's just, there's a dignity to being in a process and we can't escape process.
So how do we embrace the failure?
I would say the first thing is how you relate to it. Like, obviously, if you feel like you failed, it's doesn't resonate for me to say you didn't and you learned something from it. I know it's true, but I think it's about seeing it as part of a process and not something that happened. Like, I look at my successes like a conversion rate. Like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there for 100 things, and I know that, you know, 80 of them are going to fail. And so if you can look at your process like what it is, a process, and not see it as a failure, one-off, I think that really helps, is managing your expectations about what success really should look like. I also think it's like being in a community is really, really powerful because then you're not making decisions alone and you're not failing alone. I love being in a community of incredibly smart thinkers, and it really helps me make decisions from a place of, okay, like I'm not alone in this and I'm running this by people that I really respect. And that way the failure is less personal. You know, you've made educated attempts in avoiding it. And again, failure is not scary. Right now, I am more financially and spiritually successful than I've ever been. I absolutely love what I'm doing. I'm, like I said, helping so many people book and write TED Talks on the TedX stage. And I never have had so much fulfillment. I've made more money before, but I didn't have as much fun making it. And so that is really a result of a lot of pain and effort, right? Like, it's hard to be who you are. It's painful to be who you are. It's not always easy. Like, being who you are takes so much vulnerability, you know, and putting yourself out there. And for me, what got me to this place was, you know, I wrote a TED Talk for myself that went super viral. And it did so well that people started finding me. But the process of writing that, it reminds me of Ernest Hemingway. He talks about how there's nothing to writing. You just sit at the typewriter and bleed. And that's how I feel. It's like I have sat at the typewriter and bled for myself as a speaker, as a communicator, to get to this moment where I am loving the opportunity to help people write their talks and have their voice. But this really could not have existed without the vulnerability and the trial and error. And I know nobody wants to hear it, but it is simply the truth of the human experience to me.
That is everything I teach and talk about is unleashing your voice. The number one step to doing that is getting vulnerable. Number two, it takes courage. It is so scary to show up as we are. And you said that, what do we know better than who we are? I actually would argue with that a little bit because I think a lot of us don't know who we are truly because we've masked that side of us so long to fit in so many different ways of our life. So it's almost like this process of relearning who you are so that you can shed everything and become vulnerable, whether it's on the page, on the stage, on a podcast, or just in a personal conversation in your life. It doesn't matter. That vulnerability is what connects us. Yes,
for sure. I completely agree with you. So I can't even dispute that. I think not knowing who you don't know something until the life doesn't work this way. It doesn't work like question. It doesn't work like answer. It works like question, then answer, question, then answer. So people who are uncomfortable in the unknown, it's like they just want the answer, but they don't want to sit in the question. And there is, again, a dignity to being in that process.
So how do you take someone into that journey? How do you help someone really learn to discover who they are?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to help them notice where they feel good, which sounds obvious and it's not. Like a lot of people don't know what feels good for them much beyond their favorite food or their favorite music. So I really like to take a look at, okay, when you look at your life, who are the people that make you feel like you? Who are the people that make you feel a sense of home? I have a lot of friends, but there's a specific few that my nervous system is more regulated around. I'm co-regulating with them because there's something about who they are that brings me back into me. And so I would say that's the first thing that's really, really important, is who are the people that especially make you feel like you, and can you go make time for them? The second thing is self-expression, right? Like I love dance classes. I love dancing in general. Really taking a look at what is that thing that makes you feel like you? You don't have to like dance classes, but what is the thing that you do like? And being really candid with yourself about that so that you can give yourself that freedom of going to do that thing that makes you feel connected. So I would say that's just some of the perspectives. There's also places like I feel the most me at the beach. I love the beach. There's something about it for me. And I think, it's important that I go. And so when I'm feeling a little disconnected, I make a point to go to the beach. So this is just an example of kind of how my thinking works with taking care of myself and being me.
And then taking it to the next step, how do you lean into that courage to start to express this version of you?
Yeah, I like that you use the word courage because it really does take a lot of courage to be yourself. I would say the first thing is one step at a time, right? Like we don't need to, it's like when you go on a diet, you don't need to go to the gym 7 days a week and transform everything you eat all in the same 3-day period. Like it's a process, it's micro steps. So I would say maybe making a list, this week about what are the things, people, places that make you feel like you. That's just a really good step and a worthwhile one. So that's what I would say is just one step at a time.
And then, so when you're doing this and you're helping people speak on stage in this way and touch and communicate, is there anything that you can help them to feel more comfortable in that? Because I know, like you said, it is uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable to show up as ourselves. So how do we deal with that uncomfort?
Yeah.
Or discomfort?
Yeah, I think that comes to your nervous system. You've got to learn how to regulate yourself to sit in that discomfort, because the people out there that you see that are, what we would call successful, they're simply knowing how to regulate their system so that they can keep stepping into the discomfort and keep being whoever that it is that they feel that they are. So I would say anybody who's listening, make a list. If you could, what are some things you could do to get to where you think you might want to be? Maybe there's some uncomfortable things on there. Well, which ones are you actually willing to be uncomfortable for? Like, which things do you want so much that you're willing to step in the discomfort? Because for me, the ultimate discomfort is being stuck in the same life I don't want. So I'm willing to put myself in really uncomfortable positions. And it's not that it gets easier, but you do kind of get used to it. And so it's really just a choice of how you want to live your life ultimately.
Well, and I think that happens a lot, especially when it comes to big life changes and events. Like the discomfort is more welcomed than staying stuck where you are. And I think that's part of it is like we can get stuck in a certain position or place in our life. And there might have to be something big to push us out of it, so much so that we are willing to take that unknown route, or we are willing to get uncomfortable to make that change, because change is not fun always.
Exactly. 100%.
So, I mean, what do you say to people that feel stuck? Like, is it the same kind of concepts, like just making these lists and starting to go within? Or do you have other ideas for people that might feel like they're stuck and maybe they haven't had that big life-changing event happen to them? But they do want to make a change, but they feel stuck. Like, I can't do anything about it.
I think it's inner work. Like, we all come into the world with a certain, inner set point of what we believe and what we think about the world. And so I would say, like, really taking a look at what is your thermometer set at, like you grew up in your parents' household, no judgment on them. They did their best. What do you disagree with? What's actually true for you? Starting to really tune into what you think about things, I think is really, really key. People sometimes don't even question what they think. So I would just take a look at, like, what kind of house did you grow up in? What were the norms that you were exposed to? And what do you actually think?
But I would argue some of us don't have the freedom to do that.
Right.
Because what if you find yourself in a position where, like, okay, you have a family to take care of? Like, how do you navigate those scenarios where you feel like you don't have the freedom to truly take that exploration?
I think everybody has freedom to do inner work and self-explore, but I think people have less bandwidth. I think it really comes down to what's not negotiable for you. Yes, people have families. Yes, they need to provide for them, but they do have 5 minutes of solace. I'm certified in meditation, which is something I just did for myself. And I've learned that the people who think they can't are the ones who need it the most. And so I don't agree that you absolutely can't do it, but I do agree that it is challenging to find that time and space, and it's a luxury to have a lot of it. But nonetheless, I do think people can create that space to go inwards and ask themselves those deeper questions of, like, what did I grow up around and do I believe it?
Well, I mean, I agree with you 1,000% about the meditation. The people that don't think think they can't do it or don't think they need it are the ones that need the most. I am in that group. I actually know I need it. I struggle with doing it myself. I'm better at the guided meditations, but I know I actually really just need to do the meditation on my own. So how do we bring ourselves there? And why do you think it is those of us that struggle with meditation that need it so much?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that being with ourselves is really uncomfortable. And we saw that with COVID. We saw that a lot of people who went from being very social and being very busy were in a position where they were being with themselves. And that was incredibly uncomfortable. So I have a lot of compassion for people who, don't want to meditate, because I think subconsciously it's hard to be in silence with yourself, especially in a world where there's so much to do.
I mean, that I think is my biggest issue with it. My mind is just like, goes like crazy. It just ruminates, and it's hard to just quiet your mind. So how would you get a tip? Like, how would you help quiet the mind so that you can go within? Or do you allow your thoughts just to come in, pop in and out as they will?
Yeah, I would say there's no wrong way to meditate, and it's okay if your mind is talking. If anything, that is going to happen no matter what. So don't make it wrong, because it's natural. And just to start with the guided meditations, because those are low-hanging fruit, and those allow you to really get a sense of meditation and get comfortable with it, so that you can transition into maybe 5 minutes of silence at a certain point.
So you really advocate silence and getting to know yourself.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because you start to see thoughts that drift in that you never even noticed you had. You start to feel sensations in your body that you didn't even know. Maybe it's sadness. But I do think silence, and there's a lot of research that meditation, puts your brain, your theta waves, you're experiencing different brain waves. So the altered state, with that comes a lot of wisdom that you're not accessing in your waking life.
So when we can start to do that, is that where we start to find that clarity of our purpose and the career path, or where we should like put our focus and go with what we want to do in the world?
Yeah, I think that we can't figure out our career in meditation, but I do think it's a contributor to it. I think that being able to be in silence and start to notice where you feel sadness, what it's really about. I think that meditation, although the intention is silence and witnessing the mind, when you step out of it, you come out differently every single time. If you talk to anyone who meditates a lot, they are accessing awareness that is, incredibly profound over time.
So how did you do it? Like, how did you take that step from, one career into another? Like, how did you pivot?
I would say the first thing is I was pretty experimental. I started my business on the side and I didn't leave corporate until I had the stability through my business. I really was intentional about, I think that there's too much content out there about like burning the bridges behind you and leaving everything behind. And to me, that sounds incredibly unstable for people. And the worst way to get clients if you're in a service-based business is to be needy and desperate. Like that is not what you want for yourself. So I'm an advocate for people setting themselves up to be as resourced as possible as they're building their business. Because when you take clients from need, you're usually not always working with people that you want to work with, getting testimonials you want to be getting. I'm just as diligent about saying no to clients that I can't help as I am to saying yes to ones that I know I can.
So you're really talking about, the energy you're putting out there when you're looking for clients or looking for your business, it's going to come through if you're needy.
100%. Yeah. I think that a lot of humans believe that we are truly our five senses, but there's so much going on in communication beyond the words said. There's energy there. And I think that, a lot of the times I can handle what people are saying, but what I'm challenged by is the energy it's riding on. And so I think that's what breaks rapport more than anything. And so I think we all have a responsibility as we increase our awareness to not just be mindful of what we say, but how we are saying it.
Do you think that I feel like this conversation is happening more. We're talking about energy more. We're talking about our intuition more. And I do find that anyone I speak to that has had the quote unquote success that we all say is success always comes back to their inner gut, their inner self, their gut, their intuition. Everything always lies in that. And that's what leads them on their path and their journey and to whatever success they have. But I do feel like it's now becoming more mainstream, that we are talking
100%.
about it more regularly. And it's not so crazy to talk about. And even like you're saying, it's like gathering the information from either our clients or potential clients or who we want to work with, even a company or a brand. There's something in the energy of it that draws you to it or repels you. So do you think we are all becoming more open, consciously aware of the energy that is being passed besides our five senses that we all talk about?
Yeah, for sure. The government declassifying UFO sightings and, I don't know what people believe about aliens and life on other planets, but I do think that we are in a quantum shift of consciousness, and that there are moments where the future is leaking into the present. And I remember 5-6 years ago seeing Tony Robbins on the cover of Fortune magazine, thinking it was one of those moments like that so many CEOs are listening to life coaches and receptive to spirituality as they lead, and it's trickling down from the top of the Fortune 500. So for me, I do think that we are just in an era that is not just more receptive, but hungry for spiritual answers. And I think that, a lot of people are looking for purpose in their work, where I think that your life is a place you can get purpose. It doesn't always have to come direct from your work. But yeah.
Can we quantum shift our reality?
Of course. I think we can. I'm my own expert on myself, so I don't see myself as a guru. I got my graduate degree in psychology and I know a lot, but I do think that I've shifted my own life, and I meet people all the time who come from circumstances that don't make sense, and they rise well beyond that. And it's because of how they shift their own reality. I see it time and time again.
So what's the difference between quantum shifting and manifestation?
I mean, that's not my expertise, but I do think that manifestation is a process based on spiritual principles and universal laws. And I do think that there's a science to it. Like, I know a lot of practitioners talk about the reticular activating system in your brain, and that part of you that when somebody says they saw a Tesla today, suddenly all you see is Teslas. Like, your brain is wired to look for things it's intentionally wanting. So I do think there's a lot of sense in putting your focus on visualization and the power of having a vision. And I'm writing a lot of TED Talks right now for trauma healing practitioners and psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors who have a lot to say on these matters. And it's really inspiring to learn from them.
So what are they talking about? Because I mean, I'm in a space, or my husband's in the space of like TMS and rewiring the brain. Like, there's all this stuff that's working in the, that's out there, that we are rewiring our brains in all these new ways. So from a trauma perspective, from, any other which ways?
I do know that there's two different types of trauma. Like, there's big trauma big T trauma that people identify as like huge events, like being held gunpoint. And then there's little T trauma. And I think that little T trauma is, those minor life events that influence how you see yourself that you can carry throughout your life, like not getting invited to a birthday party. To me, trauma is the repeated thought system and bodily experience we have of something, and not necessarily what actually happened. And so I think the good news is, as much as we make that pain in ourselves, or we keep thinking a certain way, we can unthink that. Obviously, the first step is awareness. And I think one of the biggest problems of our time right now is that people have a lot of awareness, but they're not actually choosing differently. And I think that awareness without action is toxic.
That's brilliant. So how can we follow you? Where can we listen to your TED Talks? Where can we learn more about honing our awareness and making these changes and pivots in our life? Yeah,
I think that, the best place to probably find anything with me is ashleystahl.com. It's ASHLEYSTAHL. And I'd be honored to hear from you. And thank you so much, Courtney, for having me. I truly appreciate you sharing me with who's listening. And I'm sending everyone a lot of love with everything we have going on in the world right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley, for all your expertise and your conversation. I loved meeting you today.
You too. Thank you.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Ashley Stahl, for the beautiful conversation all about going within and learning to understand who we are on an inner level, so that we can find the courage to show up in the world, in our career, in our family, in every aspect of our life, and be who we are in the best way possible, so that we can make the impact that we want to make. If you want to work with Ashley, I'll put all the information of how to get in touch with her in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Media and Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.